Our lineup for the salon is going to bring you an escape from the dire news of the moment in all kinds of exciting and inspiring ways. But before I tell you about who we're going to talk with tonight, I want to tell you a little bit more about Pygmalion, a festival-style event. This is its 16th year, and Pygmalion has always been about innovation, but in 2020, the organizers have obviously had to innovate more than ever before to transform a live event of artists, authors, musicians, and thinkers into the virtual event that you're watching right now. Pygmalion is based in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, home to the University of Illinois. And this small Midwestern community has a long history of innovating. Here are just a few of the technological developments that you can translate back to Champaign-Urbana. The web browser, the MRI, modern air conditioning, whipped cream in a can, sweet corn. So really, the innovation that Pygmalion is doing in 2020 is just an extension of what Champaign-Urbana has always been about. For tonight's salon, we have invited people who reflect the melting pot of America. We're going to be joined by an actress who's breaking down some of the barriers that keep people of color from enjoying the great outdoors. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Fab Lab at Illinois, we're speaking with an inventor who inspires young people to get their hands dirty and create. We'll be joined by a young Iraqi-American author who has created a platform to give voice to global refugees. A transgender, transgenre artist who has reinvented themselves on the downtown New York performing arts scene countless times over the decades. And a group of Jewish friends who created a star-studded virtual holiday celebration that raised millions of dollars for the CDC Foundation. And speaking of fundraising, Pygmalion is raising money for some important causes tonight. Please go to thisispygmalion.com/donate and give whatever you can. Now, grab a drink, a bite to eat, settle in, and enjoy. I'm Ari Shapiro, and this is our closing night salon here at Pygmalion. Our first guest is an actor, comedian, musician, podcaster, outdoorswoman. Tawny Newsome stars in the Netflix show Space Force. She is one of the hosts of the podcast, Yo, Is This Racist? And she wants you to get out into nature. Tawny Newsome, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Oh, I love the way you put it. She wants you to get out into nature. It feels like a wartime ad. I do. Right. I want everyone.
Before we get to why, tell me about your own relationship to nature. Like, how did this become a part of your life when you were growing up?
Yeah, I guess it just always was, and I didn't even realize it. I grew up on a ranch in Northern California. My mom and I really just kind of a hobby farm. We didn't grow anything, but we had horses, we had chickens, I had a potbelly pig for a while. So I grew up in kind of, what was its name?
The potbelly pig's name.
I had two. One was Clementine, the other one was Cheerios.
Okay, please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's a valid question. I don't know why I named them either of those things. I think
They're very sweet names. That's great.
Very young. Yeah, but then, my mom was really big on taking me to, like Mount Lassen we'd go to when I was a kid, taking me hiking. We'd go to the Redwood Forest, where I know you currently kind of are right now.
I am actually in the Northern California Redwood Forest right now, actually. Yes. So
I got so excited.
It's funny because I grew up in Portland, Oregon, having the same experience, going hiking on the weekends in like the Columbia River Gorge. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized, oh, not everybody has waterfalls within driving distance of their houses.
No, I didn't have waterfalls. We had to go a long way to get to the redwoods, but it was worth it. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. Like, not everyone has access to what they think of as like, huge outdoor spaces or like these magnificent national parks that we love so much, especially in California. But like, everyone has some sort of green space somewhat nearby. But yeah, a lot of times there's just barriers to access to get there.
Specifically for people who are not white. I mean, was there a moment that you realized there are not a lot of people who look like me out here hiking and camping?
I mean, I used to, I lived in Chicago for a long time. And so when I was in Chicago, there's not a ton of stuff to do without driving for like 6 hours. So usually we'd take, like my husband and I would take a vacation. We'd go somewhere international. We'd want to see some beautiful international city, but then I'd also plan like the nature part of the trip. So if we went to Paris, we were also taking a train into the Alps and doing a big hike. So I was noticing that I wasn't seeing Black people in a lot of like hiking destinations in Europe. And I kind of thought like, oh, maybe that's just Europe. And then when I started hiking and backpacking and camping more in the States, I realized the same thing. And then I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. None of my Black family, I have a white parent and a Black parent, none of my Black family does this at all, despite most of them being almost lifelong Californians. It all came from my white side, frankly. And, you know, I always go back to this thing my dad told me where he was like, you know, for Black people, it's kind of ingrained in us that nothing good ever happened to us in the woods. So there's this very real kind of like passed down fear of open spaces like that.
Is it only historic and generational, or are there also present day barriers?
I definitely think there are present day barriers. And, you know, I also don't want to come on here and pretend like I'm some kind of scholar. I hate when actors take up a cause and then they show up and they're just like, so I've done all this research. Yes, I am like a full scholar and a professor, and I will teach you now. Really,
Again,
I'm just
you've got
like,
a megaphone, use it, you know? Like, people are listening to your voice, say something we're saying.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think I just don't want anyone who can out research me to call me on the details. I encourage everyone to do their own research.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of the modern day barriers have to do with obviously socioeconomic things. You know, I kind of dislike the phrase the outdoors is free, because while the actual earth and space is free, and while a lot of public spaces are free, the gear it takes to access them comfortably and safely often is not. Gear is a major barrier for people of all races, but especially historically for Black and brown folks, because it's just expensive to get a good pair of boots if you're going to camp, to get a sleeping bag that's rated for the type of weather we can have in some of the northern states. It's a lot of money. I don't know if you've bought camping gear lately, but it will drain you.
Yeah, and I mean, so listen, I feel like you and I both have experience in the outdoors and a background where we kind of inherently appreciate what nature provides. But to ask an obvious question, what's the benefit? Like, to go back to where we started, why
Sure.
do you want people to go out into nature? Like, what good comes out of it?
Well, there's sort of two answers, right? Like the first answer is like, most of 2020 has been a terrifying pandemic where you couldn't do anything but go outside and walk around. Like,
I'm laughing because the sentence most of 2020 has been could have so many endings that are none of them good. But yes,
yeah, I
most of
could have
2020
taken it
has
a
been
few
a
ways.
terrifying pandemic for sure.
Yeah. And like, you know,
A
without
dumpster fire.
access,
Yeah.
exactly. Without access to our normal indoor spaces, you know, I know a lot of parents who take their kids to museums, or I don't know, people do all kinds of stuff with kids that they couldn't do all this year. So some of the only option for people, even the CDC was saying, go outside for a walk, you know, go find a park, go to a green space. And a lot of people were like, I don't know the first thing about what type of footwear to wear out there. So that's kind of the 2020 pandemic answer. The answer for the rest of times, for the before times and for the after, when things are hopefully normal, is that it's a wonderful, it can be, going outside can be a wonderfully inexpensive balm for your mental health. Now, inexpensive, the caveat is with the initial buy-in sometimes of investing in gear. So it can be, you know, restorative. It can be a great stress reducer. We're constantly looking for ways to boost people's mental health. And being outside, I feel like was it Walt Whitman or someone who said that like seeing things larger than yourself have an incredible grounding. I'm butchering some quote by someone I don't
No,
even
but
know,
I
but
totally know what you mean. Like trees that exist on a time scale that humans can't comprehend, mountains that have been there since before humans walked the earth. I mean, it changes your perspective, I think.
oh, absolutely. I used to joke when I was like in Chicago and constantly trying to hustle for like theater gigs and commercial gigs. And I remember I had a colleague who used to freak out about the weight of paper that her headshot was printed on, because she was like, casting directors, they don't like that flimsy paper. I have to have the thick paper. And I just always had this refrain. Anytime I went on a hike or something, I was like, the second I see a tree that is older than me and will be here longer than me, I don't care what weight of paper my headshot is printed on.
Yeah.
It just takes
You know,
all of my nonsense and shrinks it.
absolutely. It's perspective giving. I also think that we as a culture are so wedded to the notion of productivity that certainly some people go for a hike to see how quickly they can hammer out 10 miles. But for the most part, if you're camping or you're backpacking, you're just experiencing rather than trying to check a box or do a thing or accomplish a task. You know, it's just about being in that moment where you're not staring at a screen that's 2 feet away, you're staring at a tree or a mountain. I'm actually looking out the window that is behind the screen
I
at
know,
a
I'm so
tree that has been
envious.
there for like, a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like the little tasks that you do, when you're camping and suddenly like, okay, you gotta get dinner ready. So somebody's gotta chop vegetables, but you're in this like shrunken kitchen environment, but outdoors and this beauty. Like it just takes all these tasks that you do all day long and either shrinks them or changes them in a way that makes you focus on them differently. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's the definition of meditative to me is,
Yeah.
taking some little task that's just like to sustain you or to boost your comfort.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this, I remembered that so much of this land was home to indigenous people before they were forced out. Do you think that when people of color go into these spaces and reclaim them in a way, that there is a measure of, I don't know, a sort of reclamation of non-white people saying, this is our space too? Or is that overstating it?
I wonder if, maybe for an indigenous person, they would say that. I don't think you're overstating it, to speak really simply. I think that it is, I think about my dad's family, that's my Black side. I think about how they were farmers and they were agricultural people in the deep South, and how none of that translated down through the generations to me. That wasn't brought to me until my white side, my mom, decided to live on a ranch. So I think when Black people go back, I can only speak for Black people. I think when Black people go back, and I can speak for all Black people, just in
Yeah,
case
yeah,
anyone
understood. Right. Yeah.
anyone was worried about which section, it's every single one of y'all. But I think when we go back to the land in any sort of way, whether it's living in a rural environment, I currently live rurally, even though I'm in this bizarre circle hotel room right now. Or when we enter a public lands or a national park space, there is like I feel a sense of like, hey, we kind of built this country by being in spaces exactly like this. So
Yeah.
let me come back. Let me feel like I belong here. But, and a lot of times it's the like jokes that we ourselves even make about how hiking is white people shit and how, camping is only for, only the people in Scooby-Doo were getting taken and stuff because they're white and they're nosy. Like Black people have this in general, this very kind of off, I don't know, they don't want to be out there because they don't think it's safe. All my Black friends think I'm nuts. They're always like, girl, you're going to get killed in the woods. Like,
You haven't won them over? Like, this is your cause. They're your friends. You haven't convinced them?
No, all I've convinced them of now is to worry less about me. I used to get them being like, girl, where are you going? No, don't. Now they're just kind of like, oh, she does that. Like, they just gotta, they know that
if someone listening is outdoor curious, they grew up in a city, they never thought this was their thing, but now they're starting to wonder if it might be, like, where do they even begin? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times there are local clubs and meetup groups that you can find, even if it's just getting you, depending on your comfort level, into your city's park district. Your city's park district can be a great place to start because they might have outdoor activities, depending on, COVID and what their functionality is right now. But you can get outside that way. You can look for meetup groups on Meetup or on, a lot of times I look on Airbnb, sites like Airbnb for experience hosts. Like if I go to a new city, and I don't know where I'm going and I haven't had time to research trails where I'd feel safe going on my own, I'll find one of these people, and often for maybe $20, they'll take you on a hike, they'll lead you around. A lot of people ask me about safety because they're like, you're going out with a stranger. And, I don't have a great answer for it other than there are measures that you can take the same that you would take getting into a stranger's car, like an Uber, letting people know where you're going, when you expect to be back, how long the hike is. And then little things like gear, like having just proper footwear, having enough water for yourself. I did an Instagram post about the 10 essentials a few months ago, which is like, the 10 essentials that every hiker should have for any like medium to long distance hike to ensure their comfort and safety. And a lot of it is super overkill, but a lot of those things you can just keep in your bag. And these are decided by American Hiking Society, one of them. Anyway, but they're just things that, you're never going to regret being prepared. So I would say look around, look for some small walks and trails that you could do maybe on your own or maybe with a friend. Glance at that 10 essentials list, put a couple things in your pack or purse or bag, and just start really simple. This post is about navigation and water, 2 of the 10 essentials that every hiker or outdoors person should have for a safe and comfortable adventure. So navigation is super important even on what you think are marked trails, because as you can see, sometimes they're not so well marked. So again, you don't have to buy anything fancy. If you have the means, a GPS watch is a great investment if you're outdoors a lot. But you can use plenty of apps on your phone, things like All Trails, REI's hiking project, countless others, even just like fitness tracker apps have good maps sometimes. Just make sure you have them downloaded or you're like to offline data so that you can use them out in the wilderness. If you are just using a phone, I always recommend having some sort of a backup, whether it's a paper map or just a regular old school compass, and get yourself familiar with the cardinal directions, the direction of your hike, etc., so that you don't get lost. Second thing, water. Always bring a half liter to a liter per every estimated hour of hiking, depending on your climate, elevation, all that stuff. Generally speaking, hotter climates and higher elevation require more water. Always carry more than you need. You can always drink it and pee it out later.
I also feel like, I think your 10 essentials list is amazing, but also people who haven't spent time outdoors don't have to go backpacking in the mountains. And in my experience, like, if you're walking alongside a stream, sitting next to that stream and just looking at what's in the water for like 10 minutes, like set a timer for 10 minutes. And after the first 5 minutes, you will notice things in that stream that you didn't see when you sat down. And when you stand up from that stream after 10 minutes, even if you're still in the middle of your city, you're going to kind of have a different perspective. At least that's been my personal experience.
I like that. I like the 10-minute rule too. It gives it a chunk, because a lot of times people think that their minds are going to wander or they're going to be bored. So maybe, giving them a short amount of time.
I have to set a timer, otherwise I'm like, wait, has my it's only been 2 minutes. Okay, what about now? It's only been another 30 seconds. Like, if I set a timer, I can ignore it and I can just like focus on whatever I've decided to focus on.
Yeah. And if you're a weird, like learning person, not weird, but if you love like learning about nature, there's a couple different apps. There's one called iNaturalist. They also have like a pared down version called Seek, where you can like, if you see a leaf, you want to know what that little shrub is, you take a picture, it tells you its plant family. Oh,
this is actually how I got into a lot of this before the smartphone days. My family would go hiking with like the Audubon Society bird guide or the mushroom guide or the plant guide. And we'd be like, what's that wildflower? What's that bird? Can we eat that mushroom? No, don't eat the mushrooms you find. It doesn't matter how sure you are that they're good mushrooms. Just don't eat them.
I mean, you could eat the mushroom though, and like just see what kind of time you have.
I'm gonna ask a ranger before I eat the mushroom. I'm gonna go to a professional and make sure they sign off on the mushroom before I eat that mushroom.
That's true. Oh my gosh, you just brought up rangers, and I just forgot one of the other barriers that I never considered because of just the type of person I grew up as. But a lot of Black people cite, rangers and park authorities, they look like law enforcement. They can present like law enforcement. And while rangers are there to, number one, keep you safe and also keep the park healthy and safe, the outdoor space healthy and safe, that can be frightening to people of color, to be like, oh, here's this person at the trailhead inspecting what I have and telling me what to do. That's off-putting.
It can be triggering.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sorry, rangers. I know you're just there to help.
Just take off the uniform. Just like wear street clothes. It's okay.
It's just like a casual. Yeah.
So, does this inform your day job? I mean, you are not a professional full-time outdoors person. You are a professional full-time actor, comedian, podcaster, musician, multi-hyphenate. Does the one have anything to do with the other?
Well, I mean, it directly led to me moving out of Los Angeles into a deeply rural environment where I have plenty of space to build things and make things. And, I built a studio there, so I record music and podcasts from there. And I don't think I would have been comfortable living out so far out in such a rural environment if I didn't spend so much time out in the woods. I also think it gives me a sense of self-reliance. A film set is kind of like, we kind of turn into these weird like breakable babies where, and it
Right.
both comes from
I
us
need
and
craft services. Where's my sandwich? That sort of
I
thing.
know. And it definitely comes from us being like, oh, well, I'm in these weird heels and I don't normally, so I don't want to walk all the way over there. But also sometimes it's like not safe for us to go teeter-tottering around. So a lot of times people will bring you things and open doors for you. And it just turns you into this weird inert, yeah, I always feel like a breakable baby. But when I spend a lot of time outdoors, and then like when I was shooting Space Force, that ended up being a pretty physical role. We did a lot of stuff with rigging and things in harnesses, and me having like an active lifestyle and feeling self-sufficient, I think helped me to, I don't know, not be such a wimp on set, I hope.
I also have to imagine that, like, if you're comfortable fending off a grizzly bear, you can handle a difficult scene partner, right?
That
I
is
don't
true.
know that you are comfortable fending off a grizzly bear. I'm making an assumption here, but
I hope to never find out.
fair. Same. Very
Yeah.
same.
But yeah, I mean, what can some actor do to me if I have bear spray?
Um, I think everybody right now feels a little bit crispy and feels a little bit fragile. And I think everybody's kind of looking for some sort of coping mechanism. Has this been helpful to you just in like the last 6 months, being able to go somewhere and clear your head and breathe fresh air? I mean, I guess I'm asking, how have you been?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been good. You know, the fires are terrifying, of course, and the fires all this late summer season, and I hope that they are over. But we're also about to head into a pretty significant additional fire season. You know, that's normally for California, September, October. So one thing that I was doing a lot of when it wasn't necessarily safe to go outside where I was, is I was using a map or an app or something that had like air purity across the state. And I was just looking like, what's drivable that I can get to, that I can just go and then be outside, have a picnic, go for a walk, not even like a big hike. So my husband and I did that a couple times, and it was, you know, just to breathe clean air. But it was a lot of times just finding open public land to go to, which maybe not everyone feels comfortable doing that, but because I have a relationship with the outdoors, I was more than happy to go find some random spot in the middle of a forest, take my little 4-wheel drive, and then just be like, here we are, we can breathe.
Yeah. You mentioned gear, and I know you've got this amazing 10-point list on your Instagram, which, by the way, people can find you at Tawny Newsome. That's TRONDYNEWMAN. But for people who are just getting started, like, what's the first thing you would tell somebody to buy before the bear spray, before the like cramp-on shoes? Like, where would you tell people to start?
Yeah, so a lot of the 10 essentials you already have. So you need shoes with some tread. So depending on your environment, where you live, what season you're going out in, that can mean a lot of different things. But a lot of you already have a gym shoe at least. And that can be appropriate for a lot of different types of terrains and a lot of hikes. That can be just fine. Rain, if you have any sort of rain or weather possibility, even if it's the height of summer, but you live kind of in the mountains or you're going in the mountains, staying dry is going to not only keep you comfortable if there's an unexpected downpour, and it can keep you safe if like you do get lost and it's suddenly raining. So even if you don't own a raincoat, everybody has a garbage bag. A hefty garbage bag lives in the bottom of my little pack at all times. It has saved me countless times when I forgot to bring a rain layer. So yeah, I'm always like, what's on your feet? Have something in case it rains, and bring water. That's
Water,
where you can start. Yeah, I mean, water is a huge one because I live in Southern California, and if I didn't take water, I would be a raisin person. So
yeah, I also feel like just a little small flashlight in case it's like somebody wants to go for a hike to watch the sunset and then they don't realize that it's going to be pitch black on their way back down. Like, just have a flashlight.
That is a good point. Yeah, a little flashlight, a little headlamp. You can get that at a dollar store. And I know a lot of our phones do a lot of these things. Like a lot of people are like, oh, what are you using for navigation? Oh, my phone. What are you using for your headlamp? Oh, my phone. What are you using for? So just think about how quickly you drain your battery, especially when you're posting on the gram. And just, have a backup if you're going to be gone for a while, and always tell someone where you're going.
By the way, I got to tell you, I really respect you for hiking to the hiking to the top of a mountain with a ring light. That is like a devotion to the craft that I respect.
I started I live about halfway up, so I just had to go the other half of the way.
Right.
Hello. Okay, this one's my favorite one. This one is about SPF and a knife. It's my favorite because I love talking about how the sun is a supernatural villain that is trying to destroy all of our lives. No matter what color skin you have, the sun wants us dead. So I take a lot of sun care precautions. And it's not just about like whether you're going to get a sunburn or not. The sun is incredibly draining of your energy. It zaps you. It makes you dehydrated prematurely. So you will hike longer and stronger and better if you take some basic sun protective measures.
Well, you know, I'm going to make some enemies by saying this, but as somebody who grew up on the West Coast and lives on the East Coast, I really envy you living on the West Coast, but I'm glad to be able to at least spend a little bit of time here. And thank you for sharing your experiences and your guidance with us. It's really been a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking with you too. And, you know, I do try to answer my DMs. I get a lot of Black people who message me and are like, girl, where do I start? This is what I have. This is where I live. And so I do invite people to do that. I may not get to it, but you can DM me on Instagram and ask me questions if you just want to get out there. Because I really think it's so worth it for everyone's health and sanity.
That's amazing. Tawny Newsome, thank you so much. It's been really great talking to you.
Hey, thank you, Ari. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. You too. 10 years ago, a team at the University of Illinois joined with folks from the Champaign-Urbana community to create a maker space. They transformed one of the oldest buildings on campus into a space where people could imagine, innovate, and build. The Fab Lab at the University of Illinois now has almost 2,500 visitors a year. They host summer camps and classes for kids. And to celebrate the Fab Lab's 10th anniversary this year, I am thrilled to welcome one of the most creative makers I know, Simone Giertz. You may have watched her transform a Tesla into a truck, make a coffee table out of matches, or create a number of shitty robots. Just the other day, she made a musical instrument out of teeth. She's here to talk with us about getting creative and using our imagination. Simone Giertz, welcome to Pygmalion.
Hi, thanks for having me. Also, can I tip my hat to you for pronouncing my name perfectly?
Oh, well, I've pronounced much harder names than that. I'm not one to brag, but Giertz, I can say.
No, but like we are in the presence of an expert, obviously, because I struggle. I mean, I try to, I think my ancestors were trolls because it's spelled Giertz, but it's pronounced Giertz, which makes no sense. But I get so many different versions of it.
You mean the old school kind of troll, not the online digital kind of troll?
No, like grandparent generation troll, or even further back, and they were like, this is how we're going to pronounce it. And I have not found a single language in which it makes sense.
Well, it is a Swedish name. You were born in Sweden, and when you were a kid there was no such thing as a YouTube maker with a Patreon. Like, that was not a thing a kid would aspire to grow up to be. What did you dream of when you were a little kid?
I wanted to, so both of my parents worked in television. My mom's a TV host and a writer. So obviously, and my dad was a TV producer and started a production company. So obviously I was like, I'm never, ever going to work in TV.
Right.
That's what my parents do. And I was like, so I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to study animal behavior and work on studying animal intelligence was like my long running dream. And then I also wanted to be an astronaut and a physicist for a little bit. And then I got sucked into entertainment and my parents were like, we told you so, we thought you like it. And I was like, oh, you're right. You knew me so well.
I want to get back to the astronaut dream because space has become like a big aspiration of yours. But before we do, I mean, I wonder, just to stick with your childhood for a moment, do you think your parents did specific things that helped nurture creativity and innovation in you, or is that just something you're kind of born with or not?
I think they definitely nurtured it because they let us do pretty much anything we wanted. Like the only rules was like, don't hurt yourself or anyone else. But I really felt like they were so forgiving about me doing things. And I always had a bunch of big projects on the way. Like I was always building stuff. I would like redecorated my room and like moved my bed around at least once a week. And they were just super tolerant about that and never really put any pressure on me to perform in any way, which pendulum swung into me getting like issues with perfectionism and becoming like a straight A kid with parents who were like, no, just be happy, sweetie. And I was like, I am going to get A's on everything. And, but yeah, I definitely feel like they just let me do my own thing.
So were you a kid who like never ever said, Mom, Dad, I'm bored? Was that just like not part of your language like repertoire?
I think I was definitely bored, but I was also like, they would just put me in a corner with some crayons and I would entertain myself. Like that's at least like the story. Like I feel like we're all told stories about our childhood.
Yeah.
And I was like that I was so easy to deal with. Like my dad's nickname for me was Simplicity because like they would put me to bed like from like as soon as I could speak. When they put me to bed, I would just say close the door and turn off the lights. But in Swedish, I would just say släck. It was just like close, turn off.
It's hilarious that your nickname was Simplicity because everything you do now is so crazy complicated. I look at it and I'm like, there are 1,000 steps here. I would have lost patience with this at step 2.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe over complex, but maybe that's pendulum as well. I'm like, I'm gonna make the most complex, useless, or sometimes useful things. Yeah.
Tell me about what the balance is between like formal official training that you had to learn the skills that you use today and figuring things out on the fly because you need to know how to do XYZ for a given project.
Well, like no formal training. I didn't really go to school for any of this stuff. So it's all just like, I want to build this thing. What do I have to learn to do that? Or what do I have to figure out? But I studied physics for a year in college and then I dropped out. But I don't have like an engineering background. It's all just from the maker community as well. Like there's so many good resources. And I considered going into engineering and studying electrical engineering when I started getting interested in hardware. But then I realized that I might be able to get a job instead in hardware and that I could get paid to learn. And that's better.
That's so interesting because I feel like even before we get to the question of how do you get creative, how do you make stuff, there's a question of how do you convince yourself that you can learn the skills you need to learn in order to make stuff? You know, I might say, oh, I'd love to build a chair someday, but I don't know that I have the confidence to say, I can go out and find out how to build a chair. And every day you're finding out how to do things you don't know how to do. Like, what's your advice for people to get that base skill before they even learn how to build a chair? You know what I mean?
I love that you're framing it like I imagine you like opening the door to a spring day and being like, I'm gonna learn how to build a chair today, world, where all you would need to do is open a browser and just be like, how to build a chair.
So Google, your answer is Google. Is that your answer?
Yeah, just Google. But I mean, it's really intimidating to start learning how to build things. And it's also like a gear sport. Like you need a lot of tools and stuff. Like, yes, you can definitely build things without a lot of tools, but it ends up being a gear sport and it requires you to have a space to do it, like a garage or, so it's definitely hard to start learning or to kind of, there's an initial threshold that's hard to get over. And for me, I really struggled because I wanted to learn how to build things. Like that was one of my goals. I wanted to learn how to weld for years and years. And my solution was that I got a houseboat. Also because I couldn't afford a place to live. And the only thing I could afford was a houseboat that I managed to buy really cheaply. And then I was like, here, I'm going to be forced to build things.
Well, the fun thing about building in a houseboat is that unlike a house on land, if you mess up in the houseboat, the whole thing just sinks. Like suddenly it'll be
up pretty hard to get it to sink. Yeah.
Really? Because I'd imagine that like one wrong drill hole and the water's coming in, no?
Yeah. But you'd have to slip pretty hard with the drill. Okay. You'd have to maybe like feint with it, but have your hand cramp around it. I think though what I want to say is it's easier to build on a boat because there's no expected standard really, or like on a houseboat, because it was like this old tugboat from 1942, and it's just like nobody walks in being like this is what I expect it to be. in the same way as you do in an apartment, and you have like these expectations of what the kitchen is supposed to look like, but on a houseboat it's like anything goes. So it was really.
How long did you live on a houseboat?
I bought it when I was 21, and then I had it for 5 years, I think.
Wow.
Then I moved to San Francisco and started doing YouTube stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
I love that. I'm sorry. That is not my advice for like how to start building things.
How to build? Go to a houseboat.
It's really easy. Yeah. There was definitely, but I will say this though, like put yourself in a context where you have to learn and where you're the expert. Yeah.
What if you're a kid who is sick of staring at a screen because you've been doing remote learning for the last 6 months because of COVID, and you want to make a thing, but you don't know where to start? What kind of advice do you have for somebody who might hypothetically be in that situation?
Can I say your brand name?
It doesn't bother me. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a bunch of different little kits that you can get. The company that I've worked with before, I'm not paid to say this at all, but I really like their product, it's called KiwiCo. And they have these little crates. So every month you can get a little box that has a project in it and instructions on how to do it. And it teaches you to build things and like basic engineering concepts. So that can be really nice because it's like, it's scary to build things off road or like figure it out yourself because you're always, you don't know if you're going down a rabbit hole that feels completely wrong. And it can be really nice to have like a manual and somebody who's figured it out, and it's still challenging, but you know, in the end, you're going to get something out of it. So I'd say that is a really good, because then you don't need any tools either.
Yeah, I loved, there was a brainstorming trick that you used on your Patreon, which led to the coffee table out of matches.
Yeah.
And the exercise was make an X out of Y. And you had your followers brainstorm the X's and brainstorm the Y's. And that's how you got to make a coffee table out of matches. Are there other exercises like that that you would suggest people give a try and see what comes up if they're interested in, I don't know, developing ideas and thinking outside of the box?
I've been on a spree with those types of projects of like, I want to make a thing that looks like a thing. Like I did a paper shredder that looks like a brain, and you put the paper in between the brain house. Or just most recently, I did a music instrument out of dental models or out of teeth. Yeah. So I really like the brief of just giving these like seemingly incompatible objects and trying to figure out how to merge them. Or like I made a lamp that looks like a pair of scissors. There's a light strip hidden in the scissor shear. But I don't really have any brainstorming exercises like that because I feel like I just have a long backlog of things I want to build.
Yeah. One of the things I love about your videos is that you don't shy away from showing the wrong turns and dead ends. And as a self-described perfectionist, I wonder how you have learned the persistence and resilience that might make a person like me just throw the half-made lamp shaped like a pair of scissors at the wall and never look at it again.
If you have like 2 million people being like, when are you going to upload your next video? That really helps. Just
the pressure.
Yeah, the pressure from needing to deliver something. But I feel like now it's like I mostly had to be very disciplined and stuff like that when I didn't love what I was doing. But I like, oh, this sounds so cliche and preachy, but like I genuinely love making things, and I feel like it has its own inertia. Like I don't have to try to force it that much because I'm just like, I want to build these things. And then the video I definitely have to push out a little bit and be like, oh, I should film this step. And then I'm like, no, I just want to build and like not have to think about how to tell the story as I'm living through the story.
How often do you start building a thing and then realize like, no, this is just not going to work. This video will never see the light of day. Project abandoned.
Not very often, to be honest.
That's amazing. That is so impressive.
How often do you like record things and then you're like, nah?
Pretty often.
Oh yeah.
You'd be surprised how many bad interviews I've done. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I've done a lot of bad interviews.
Is this going to make the cut?
This will make the cut, Simone. This is the farthest thing that, I mean, I'm enjoying it anyway. Yeah. So I as we talk about sort of like desire to be perfect and to make the thing and sort of like control the outcome, you've been pretty transparent about a brain tumor that you have been treated for, which you've named Brian. which seems like the ultimate lesson in not being able to control everything.
Yeah. Uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the things that a perfectionist sort of runs in the opposite direction of, right? Are you comfortable giving us an update on how things are?
Yeah. So it's been 2 years, over 2 years since I had my surgery, and then I went through radiation treatment a year and a half ago, and I'm doing great. And actually, so I've had to have MRI scans every 6 months to make sure that the tumor hasn't grown, because I still have tumor left that they weren't able to surgically remove. Now I just got bumped up to yearly checkups instead, because they're like, nah, he dead. We don't need to check him.
Congratulations, that's huge.
Yeah. So that was really,
Wow.
really nice and such a huge relief, because it's a little bit like living with this. I don't really let myself go into like, what if? I like having another brain surgery is so low on my list of things I want to do right now. I'm very, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like for now, at least I have a year where I don't have to think about it. So that's really, really nice.
That's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. Even though you and I only met today, I feel like I'm really personally delighted to hear that you've got that good news.
I can't recommend it. Like, if you can avoid it, don't. It is.
Yeah. The cliche is that an experience like that makes people change their life or changes their perspective. Did you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I mean, I can't do headstands anymore. I wasn't doing them before, but it's like one of the few things I'm not allowed to do. So it's a limitation I can live with. I have come to terms with it.
Okay.
No, I think honestly, this is also, yeah, very cliche of being like, and this is also coming from a privileged perspective of like, it went well. Like, I don't have any lingering consequences of it or side effects. But if I could live without the experience, I wouldn't. Like, if I could have it all undone, I would not want that, because honestly, it's like I've been on this really weird career trajectory for the last years, and I've been very hard on myself and had to, just worked way too much, and just mostly been really mean to myself. Like, we're terrible bosses to ourselves in general. Or, I mean, I feel like a lot of people that I see who are self-employed, you're just so hard on yourself, and like, I'm being lazy. And going through health problems, it just forced me to reprogram, in the sense of like, being good was not pushing myself. Being good was resting and really like listening to my body and its limitations. And also it forced me to realize that the last 2 years, I've probably been working like maybe 60% of what I used to do before, and seeing that my output didn't really go down as much as I expected it to. Like, I work 60%, but I still get 80% or 90% even as much done, because that last 40%, like, you really don't get that much out of it. So I have cut down so much on work hours and feel like I have a much healthier relationship to my career and to like social media and work in general. So I think it just forced me to really try to be kind to myself.
That's incredible. I wish everyone could have that without the brain tumor part.
You know, it is really healthy to be unhealthy for a while, or can be, because it's like, yeah, you're also like young and naive, and you're like, I'm never gonna die. I'm never gonna, yeah. But then you realize like, oh, I'm pretty fragile, and I had to really negotiate with my body for a long time. Like, there was a point where after radiation where I couldn't hold power tools because my hands were too weak. Like, I remember like holding the sander, and I had to constantly put it down and sit down and rest. And it really forces you to like also, just decide what you spend time on, because you have such limited capacity. So I feel like it's similar to like what a lot of parents seem to go through, where they had to like get so effective with how they use the rest of their time because it's really limited, and you realize that like, you can just use it a lot smarter.
Yeah. Okay, can we talk about space?
Yeah.
You seem to me like an extraordinarily creative person who comes up with the most innovative solutions to surprising problems. And space strikes me as the opposite of that. Like in space, if you come up with a cool new way to do a thing, you might just die. So what appeals to you about going there?
I think it's just because it's the wildest thing you can do. And I mean, there's a part of me that's like, do I only want to do it because it's really hard? And yes, maybe. Because it's just like the ultimate challenge of what you can do. I mean, my space dream started in a very non-gracious way. It was my mom really wanted to go to space. Like she wanted to be an astronaut, but she never fulfilled that dream. And that's like pretty much the only dream she's ever imposed on me. Like my parents were super hands off. They were never like, do this, do that. But I remember her saying to me when I was a teenager, they're like, Simone, if you go to space, then you never have to buy me a Christmas present again.
That's the reason you want to go to space?
And I was like, that seems like a fair deal. But that kind of what started the idea with me. And then I started studying physics in college because that's like the only Swedish astronaut we have did that same program. And it's the one that my grandfather was a professor at. And but then I dropped out after a year because, but I feel like there is a new type of space that's opening up, or a new type of space travel that's opening up, where it's more of a tourism type of field than like, oh, you're the one who needs to save us or to fix this vent or the entire shuttle is going to blow up.
So what will check the box for you? Will it be producing a show in space, entering space, setting foot on the moon, doing what's the actual definition of when you can like stop giving your mother Christmas presents?
I mean, I think her bar would be a lot lower than me. Me, because I was thinking for a time that I should send my brain tumor to space, because I sent my brain tumor to Antarctica, and I was like, oh, I should try to send a slice of it to space as well. But it would be preferred. That is my second option, tier 2. But if I can go, then I will go rather than my brain tumor. I want to go to space. I want to go to the ISS is my goal. And I want to produce a docuseries about it. And I think that is like one of the experiences that I feel like as a viewer and as a fan of space that I haven't really gotten. It's just like a really unfiltered version of what it is, because like astronauts and the people who have so far gone to space, I feel like they have a level of professionalism, or like astronauts really have to be like superhuman in a way. And it is, as somebody who's really curious about what it's like to be there, I feel like I still don't have a clear idea of what it's like, or like, of course you're terrified, but astronauts can't really show that. So I think like just following somebody going through the process and being very open about the experience, it's at least something that I would want to see and that I would obviously love to go through.
Well, it seems like you are inching closer to this. I mean, you've certainly got Elon Musk's attention. Like, is this on your radar? Is this really going to happen in the near future?
I'm working on it. I mean, I'm actively working on it, but we'll see. I can't,
You're not ready to disclose here at Pygmalion? You're not ready to make
NDAs in place. Let's just say that. Yeah.
And then, like, to quote a line from Oprah, you're going to have to get bigger dreams. Like, after you've gone to space.
Oh my God. What am I? A deep seas? I don't know. There's nothing. I wonder if there's a thing as like astronaut depression.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Post space flight mortem, or what's it like? Yeah.
Something like that. The space shuttle blues. Okay, so we're talking about space, we're talking about Antarctica, we're talking about the deep sea, we're talking about these crazy adventures while we're all stuck in our houses, indoors, distant from each other. Before we go, is there anything that you can share with us about finding fulfillment in the limited space that we're all confined to these days, and staying inspired by, a giant pair of scissors or matches or mechanical teeth?
I think, it's hard. I get a lot of, I don't know about you, I get a lot of inspiration from other people and from talking to people. I have tried to still meet people that I don't know. I mean, safely, like outdoors, I ask people if they want to go on dog walks with me, like acquaintances and stuff like that, as a
You do
way.
have the most adorable dog, by the way. It's not what this is about, but I'm kind of in love a little bit.
Scraps, yeah. Her name is Scraps. No, so yeah, she definitely helps to lure people in. And then I'm like, tell me what you're excited about. But I feel like that is like, there are safe ways to still see people outdoors and at a distance and just trying to like still meet new people. And I mean, I'm moving to a new city. I'm moving to LA next week. And I'm really hoping to be able to, I know my entire workshop is packed up. It's why this like pegboard is all,
that's why you're on a bare background. I thought we were going to see your workshop, and that's huge.
It's all in boxes. Yeah. So I definitely want to just like really try to meet new people still and just talk to people about what they're excited about. I think that, but then also just finding something you can improve. Like I feel good about myself when I have some level of being productive. And if that means like, oh, I'm actually going to like sew that curtain for once and improve that, like anything that just makes you feel like, oh, I did good. I noticed. Yeah. What about you?
If I do the dishes, I feel like I'm winning.
Yeah.
I feel like a load in the dishwasher is like a thing I've accomplished. That's my productivity.
I mean, it's something, whatever works. Yeah. And also just like being really kind to yourself. There's this thing I think a lot about where the strongest material in the world, you think that it's like diamond, but it's not, because if you hit a diamond with a hammer, then it's going to shatter. Like the strongest material is something like rubber, and that's malleable. And I think that's such a metaphor for how to be in life and how to be to yourself, and just really trying to cut yourself some slack. It's hard right now. Like you can afford to be kind to yourself.
That's a lovely note to end on. Simone Giertz, thank you so much for talking with us and for all of the really interesting, entertaining, delightful videos. I look forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me. You take care.
You too.
Okay, bye.
It's here. The truck the world didn't know it was waiting for. It's the dawn of a new beginning. Some trucks rely on roads already paved. Some choose to pave their own. Push past convention. Empower yourself beyond what's possible. And if the thing you want doesn't exist yet, you step up and make your own. Don't just leave a footprint when you can leave your mark. The power is in your hands to take charge. Engineered to embrace every turn, while safely guarding what matters most. You choose where the road leads. The new 2019 Truckla. Available nowhere.
All right, our next guest could have written a memoir about his own life experiences. Ahmed Badr was born in Iraq. After a bomb destroyed his family's house during the war there, they moved to Syria. And in 2008, they came to the US as refugees. Ahmed created a website called Narratio. It's a platform for young people around the world, including refugees, to express themselves. And now he has a new book out called While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel, Stories, Poetry, and Art from Young Refugees Around the World. Oh, and he also just graduated from Wesleyan University. So Ahmed Badr, welcome, and thank you for making me feel like an underachiever. It's good to have you here.
Good to see you, Ari. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into the book, will you just share some of your own experience that reflects kind of the idea that you brought to this collection? Because you're an artist and a writer in your own right. As I said, you could have created an entire book just about what you had lived through. And the book does include some of your own work. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you express your story through your work.
Sure. So as you mentioned, my family, we left Iraq in 2006, moved to Syria, and then eventually were resettled to as refugees to the US. And during high school, I started to kind of explore that journey and trying to explore that journey really just to try and understand my own experience. As an Iraqi American Muslim refugee, I was like, what does it mean to be all of these things at once? How can I begin to explore the intersections between these different identities? And so one way that I started doing that was through writing. And so it started out with just, essays here and there, poems. And then from there, it was like, okay, well, this was good for me. Why not make it available to other people? And then the work started to evolve from there. Then the poems turned into, from just like written work to performances and workshops. And I started to really learn about the power of my individual story. And after a couple of years of being privileged enough to be able to share the story with folks around the world, I thought, okay, well, why not make this available to other people? But also, I think more critically, why not, utilize the power of the personal story to make other spaces possible for other stories to exist that can transcend just my own personal experience. So all of my work is now centered around this idea of how can we create spaces and systems for young displaced folks to express themselves on their own terms. And that is, what this book is trying to achieve really is that, okay, well, you're meeting someone where they're at and you're asking them, how do you want to introduce yourself to the world? Here's this project that's for you to be able to hopefully do that on the largest case possible.
So give us a little sample of your own work, your own art, before we zoom the camera lens out and talk about all of the other young people whose lives you've touched through Narratio and this book and the workshops and things that you mentioned. Give us something of your own.
Yeah, so I'd like to read Nakhal. Nakhal is one of the works in this book. This is another thing that was really difficult to kind of maneuver around and kind of figure out throughout the book, and we'll talk about this in a bit, I hope. It's just this idea of my own position throughout this. I'm not just an editor here. I'm not just, an author. I'm somewhere in between where I have a personal connection to every single one of the 27 folks featured here, right? We had an interaction, and then, through that interaction, this work was born. And so this, throughout the book, you'll see kind of different color pages that show my own poetry throughout, not necessarily to take any attention away from the others, but to hopefully be a guiding and mediating force. And so this is Nakhal. Nakhal is dedicated to the date trees of Iraq. Yesterday, I saw a picture of a field of date trees, cut off at the head where the fruit is supposed to grow. I tasted my first date in Baghdad when I was 3 years old. My father picked the fruit straight from the tree and handed it to me. I immediately tasted the sweetness in my fingers. Back then, I had date-sized hands. All of the dates I tasted were grown at my grandparents' home. We had 4 date trees stretching into the sky. One of our trees was over 20 feet tall, and we had to hire someone to climb it when harvest season came along. The trees had lessons within their roots. I imagine a botanist at an elite American institution looking at a date tree from Baghdad. He might study and marvel at the resilient plant, but he won't see the centuries of wisdom. He will miss the lessons. Yesterday, I asked my mom about dead things. I asked her why the date trees had been cut off at their heads and why they were drooping. She said that they don't stand because their roots are tired. They don't speak because their lips are in a foreign museum. They're stuck behind a language barrier. Mama, are date trees a metaphor for our country? Ask your grandmother, she said. She's seen enough date trees to be more knowledgeable than all of Iraq's parliament. My grandmother grew up in the 1940s, back when Iraq was a kingdom that God still cared about. She said back then the fruit tasted sweeter and the date trees grew with pride. Back then we walked with stories on our shoulders and emptied them out at the dinner table. Back then you didn't just wear your clothes, you wore your ancestors. She told me that on Thursdays she wore Babylon and on Mondays she wore Sumeria. She told me that on Fridays she loved wearing her two favorite earrings, the Tigris and the Euphrates, the rivers that run through our country. Today, I saw a picture of a country, cut off from any color, going to sleep without plans for awakening. I saw a picture of a playground where children are supposed to play with their date-sized hands.
Ahmed, that is so beautiful, and it. You know, when I hear that poem, I can't imagine how in a workshop with other young refugees, you manage to elicit something like that from a person who might never have written a poem before, or an essay, or painted a painting, whatever it is that they want to do for their artistic expression. How do you begin to take what you've been able to express through art and lead a workshop to show other people how to do something similar?
I think it starts with redefining what those mediums are and making them accessible, and doing that through your own personal experience. I rarely start workshops with poems. I usually just start them by sharing my own personal experience as an entry point to an exercise that revolves around poetry. And sometimes we don't even call it poetry. You know, it's just kind of an exercise about what you want to share with the world. And in turn, what ends up being expressed can be categorized as poetry. So I think it starts with, you know, sharing your own personal experience and the ways that you've been able to articulate it, but also in making these mediums available. Poetry is usually this thing that, you know, is very, there has so many rules around it. This has to rhyme, this has to come after this. And, you know, within these workshops, we didn't do that. We shied away from that. You know, we mentioned that your own story and all of these different mediums are tools for expressing that story, you know. And in many cases, and, you know, when, in some of the workshops, you know, in the camps where you have in the same room, folks that are very young, you know, anything from like 10, 12 years old, and sometimes even younger, folks that are much older. So that, you know, sometimes it's difficult to manage both of those age groups, not necessarily because, you know, of their own experiences, but just because, you know, folks are coming at this from so many different perspectives, and you want to meet folks where they are. I'll never forget the first workshop I did. It was at a camp north of Greece, where a lot of the work is sourced from. The very first workshop, it was in a tiny room, and we had like 30, 40 folks, something like that. And I spoke in Arabic and then translated the Arabic into English. And then my Arabic was translated into Kurmanji, which is a Kurdish dialect. And then English was translated to French for the one French guy, or his French-speaking guy in the room. And we had to do this through every single line of the project, and so of the workshop. And so it's this kind of constant negotiation of around these languages, but also, again, starting with your own personal experience and letting that guide the exercises. And
the work in this collection does, as you mentioned, come from people all over the world, and some of it is really incredible poetry, although there's a lot of other stuff in there too. We have a video of one of the contributors named Khadija Mohammed reading a poem that she wrote. I believe she's from Somalia. Will you just tell us a little bit about her, and then we can show the video?
Absolutely. So Khadija is one of the most incredible humans I've ever had the chance of meeting. We worked together on the Narratio Fellowship. So we launched the Narratio Fellowship last summer in partnership with Syracuse University and the Met. And Khadija was one of our fellows. And so inaugural class of fellows. And what we did in this program was we introduced displaced young people in the US, resettled refugees, a group of 11 from all different parts of the world, to different forms of storytelling. So we had different workshops, whether it's about podcasting or photography or what have you, but focused the whole program on poetry. And so what we did was, because our partner at the Met was the Ancient Near East Gallery, each fellow picked an object from that gallery and then reimagined its label as a poem. And so Khadija's performance is, and so once they did that, we went to the Met and they performed these pieces in the Ancient Near East galleries. And so this video is of Khadija's performance of her poem Nakh Iskadik, which means think like a lady. Yeah, I'll let her take it away.
Great, let's watch.
Hello everyone, my name is Khadija Mohammed. I'm from Somalia, but I live in Syracuse, New York. The title of my piece is Nakh Iskadik, and just a backstory, Nakh Iskadik in our culture means act like a lady, and that's usually a phrase used to put down women and to tell them to like stay in the kitchen and not do what they're like meant to do. So this is to like go off of that. As I stand here carrying food on my head, I hope the nutrients can seep through straight into my brain and remold what it means to be a woman. Nakh Iskadik, as if that's to remind you that power is placed in the hands of men. Nakh Iskadik, as if to put you in a woman's place. Nakh Iskadik, play the role that women have played, but they don't know. Nakh Iskadik are words of encouragement. They say Hadi Nakh Tahai Samay, but as a female, I rise before the sun, saying goodbye to the night while welcoming the new day. My hands gracefully making a feast of Anjaro Ber Isha. Delicately adding each ingredient without having to measure, an art form that was passed down from Aye Yasha. Nakh Iskadik, but they don't know. I carry yesterday's workload in my joints. I carry humanity's humility in my stomach for 9 months. I carry the worlds of love in my heart, and I carry these fruit gracefully on my head. Now where did throw like a woman come from? As if we're weak. As if every month we don't battle ourselves and clean up the blood, period. As if we can't be both gentle as ripples in a stream or as electrifying as a thunderstorm. Did you forget at once you were inside of me, depending on me? I opened up the uterus portal, wincing through the pain to get you out here, so never forget. My grandmother says, "Markilu dalai dahaba ahed, you were born golden, don't ever cheapen yourself. Bakhortoyo runs in my blood and is evident in my golden mulab skin. My crown is this basket and my jewelry are the sweat, tears, and blood it took to get here." Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce the star herself, is Starling!
All right, Ahmed Badr, as I've mentioned, you've lived the most extraordinary life, everything from speaking at the UN to recording a BuzzFeed video making shawarma with Ben Stiller. Little clip of that. You could have written a book that was just about your life experiences to date. Why did you decide instead to edit this collection of work from young people around the world?
I think, my own personal experience and my own relationship to my own personal experience has been made possible by folks that have shown me how to share my story. And so I think before, sharing my own story in a memoir or something else, which is something I'm still interested in doing, I felt that I needed to do this first, and to kind of pay homage to the folks that helped me with my own story and the spaces that my own story has been able to exist within. And so this project was a way of, in a way of culminating all of that work and something physical, something that I can, hold and share with folks and say, hey, this is the work. And I also just recognize the power of seeing your work represented in something that you can hold and then that you can later perform. Khadija, for example, the video was just of her performance at the Met, but since the program, she's performed at the UN, she's performed at Christie's, she had a photography exhibit that featured her at Christie's, has performed several times locally, has become a very well-known activist in her own community, not necessarily just because of the program, but just because of, her own dedication to her personal expression that I hope was, activated and amplified by the program. And so it's this idea that, okay, well, and this is a question I've always asked myself is how can I empower myself by empowering those around me? And this project was a way of hopefully putting that question to action and actually hopefully answering it in some way, shape or form. but also in carrying the work forward and saying, okay, well, everyone represented here can now claim this as their own. It's not just my book, right? And so I felt like I needed to do that first before maybe taking another step back and looking at future projects and thinking, okay, maybe I need to focus on my experience again and still continue the work, but take a step back as well. So I think this needed to happen first before I felt comfortable to fully tell my own story.
Yeah. Well, I think a nice note to end on is the work of Jamil Khan, because obviously stories and art inspired by the refugee experience is going to include a lot of tragedy and adversity, but there's also a lot of joy. And you've got a bunch of art in here from this young man from Afghanistan, including this exuberant painting called Lost in Joy. Tell us about Jamil.
Yeah, Jamil I met in Greece. So we had several interviews, and then we just became such a great friend, you know, throughout the course of this project. And what's really struck me about Jamil is it's something that's really, I think, at the heart of this book is that, yes, it features folks that have been displaced. Yes, it features, you know, at some moments, some very kind of intense and tragic expressions and stories, but that's not necessarily the point. The point is to kind of present all of these different multimodal, you know, stories, poetry, art, in a way that complicates what we think about when we hear that word refugee, right? And also challenging this idea that a refugee story ends when they leave home, or their story is limited by what happened to them to make them leave home. And so I hope through all of the works represented is that, you know, yes, that's an important thing to include, but we also have to talk about what happens next. And I think with Jamil and his beautiful artwork and our story, that the story included in the book from our interviews, it kind of talks about, you know, why they left home, talks about his family, but also talks about how, you know, he had a crush on this girl and that's why he started painting. And all of a sudden he has this whole notebook full of works, and then it starts this whole thing, and he becomes he becomes exhibited across Athens and beyond, and he's continued that work. So really, I think with Jamil, what was really beautiful is that obviously he's a very talented artist, you know. He's not a talented refugee artist. He's a talented artist that happens to be a refugee. And so I hope that through this book and everyone represented in it, that idea is hopefully offered and extended, that these are folks who happen to be displaced that are now expressing themselves in these ways. It's not just a book about, you know, the refugee journey or refugee tragedies.
Ahmed Badr, his new book is called While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel. Congratulations, and thanks for talking with us about it.
Thank you so much, Ari. Always a pleasure.
Idea of what a refugee is in people's minds. There's an image there that doesn't really correlate with reality. It's not something you choose. They're looking for an opportunity just to have a life.
Exactly. And when we first came to the States, you know, my parents had to find jobs. They had to figure out how to make ends meet.
Yes.
And Americans have to do that as well. We have to start thinking of the common thread through these experiences. It doesn't have to be this foreign thing.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay.
It's just like amazing familiarity that happens. Where like right mid-bite, you're transported somewhere else and you're reminded of not only just like the food, but the people that prepared it.
No, and really I'm just like struck by the, how much I like to eat food. I love food. Oh, yes.
Our next guest has been an innovator in the visual and performing arts for decades. Justin Vivian Bond has wowed audiences from Carnegie Hall to the Sydney Opera House. They have released albums and a memoir, performed in movies and TV shows, sold out galleries full of their works of art, and won countless awards. They were nominated for a Tony for Kiki and Herb Alive on Broadway, and last year they made their operatic debut in Vienna. All this while keeping New York's downtown cabaret scene vital, relevant, and evolving, and while working at the forefront of trans rights and LGBTQ activism. Justin Vivian Bond, that was a long-winded way of saying you are a legend, and it's an honor to have you with us here at Pygmalion. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Look, this is motion. This is motion for Zoom.
So you are in upstate New York, in the Hudson River Valley, in the House of Whimsy, where you have been creating art in quarantine. And I feel like the innovation that has characterized your entire career has also characterized what you've been doing during this pandemic. You had a run of live shows suddenly canceled, and you created this character, Anti-Glam, to do virtual performances. Tell us about who Anti-Glam is.
Well, I had sort of been thinking I needed a new character, and so I came up with this Anti-Glam because I wanted somebody that I could just like escape into. I created Kiki, who was probably another character that I was well known for in the face of the AIDS pandemic. I guess I come up with a new character every pandemic.
I actually want to talk to you about that, because I do feel like in some ways your high points have been defined, your high points artistically have been defined by crisis moments in society. But before we get to that larger question, specifically doing these virtual happy hours after years of doing live performance with an audience in the flesh, tell me about what the difference was and what that felt like.
Well, it's very interesting because I like doing the happy hours actually very much, because as the years went by, I sort of honed my career so that I would basically, have to leave my apartment and walk to work at Joe's Pub. And now I literally only have to go upstairs, put on my makeup, and walk into my living room to do these shows, which have been, I love it. I love doing that.
You're saying the worth of a gig is defined by the length of the commute. That's like your
exactly. And simultaneously, there were less people in the room, but I was reaching more people.
Yeah.
So,
but you don't hear the applause. You don't hear whether people are laughing.
That's the downside. There's all these kind of trade-offs. First of all, I always treated Joe's Pub like it was my living room. Now I treat my living room like it's Joe's Pub. And at the end of the song, there's no applause. But at the end of the show, I don't have to be nice to strangers. So, and that's always been the interstitial, I guess, psychic interstitial moment between the end of the show and when you get home, that period where you're in your sort of like mystic connection of performance is it's interrupted by you. All of a sudden you're internal when you're performing and singing, and then all of a sudden you're external and you're being interacting with a bunch of people in this completely different way. And that's the part I hate the most about show business. I think my theory is that's why a lot of introspective and performers, introverted performers, become drug addicts, because they drink and get high after the show with people so that they can deal with that shift in energy.
Let's watch a little clip of one of your Anti-Glam happy hours.
Bringing it all back home again, seeing it right through to the end, wondering how to make it right, hoping you'll sleep with me tonight, and after the time for dancing through, till I give myself to you, I spin on my thoughts and my crazy ideas, wondering whether they'll get me to go to the moonshine, dancing in the moon glow, blonde hair swinging through high lights, old crone singing to the gold child, come live this mystery tonight. Many times can I go away, and why do I have to put on this play? Every day everyone loves it just the same, and we all have to show what we do in the game. And there's glorious you at the end of the phone. I have no idea where I am when it's home. Suddenly I'm feeling so lost and alone, but you're here, and I want you to stay with a moonchild dancing in the moon glow. Come live this mystery tonight. How? Moonshine. One day in the wonderful month of May, with all its flowers of blossom, the planchette produced an exceedingly mysterious message. So far as we could understand him, he would bring more evidence of his presence. Presence. Proof was one of the words used, I remember. Yes, I remember it very distinctly. Proof. That's all we're looking for. A little honesty. A little proof. Back home again, singing it right through to the end, wondering how to make it right, hoping you'll sleep with me tonight, and after the time for dancing through, and after I give myself to you, I spin all my thoughts and my crazy ideas, wondering whether the girl will go to the moon child dancing in the moon glow, blonde hair swinging in blue highlights, old crone singing to the gold child. Come live this mystery tonight. Come live. I'm living this mystery tonight.
Did you think as you were doing these about giving people something they needed in that moment? Because I certainly felt like in a moment of crisis, Anti-Glam was providing some kind of humor and happiness and solace and like things that maybe I knew I needed and maybe I didn't know.
Yes, I mean that's how it started. I was here, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and Charlene Incarnate and
who's a well-known drag queen, performance artist, trans activist. Yeah.
And Heather Ashley do this drag brunch in New York, and it was shut down. And so they did this performance on the roof of their building on a Sunday afternoon, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, this is so great. And then I thought, well, I can just do something here from the House of Whimsy, because my roommate, my lodger, if you will, is this guy, David, who's an amazing piano player. And so I thought, well, why don't we just do a little performance to cheer people up? I didn't know that you could, you know, get people to put something into your PayPal account or anything like that. I just basically thought, all these people are home alone with nothing better to do. I'll just put on this Anti-Glam wig and I'll cheer people up. And that's how it started. And then that was in March. And then as time went on, all of these crazy things started happening. You know, George Floyd and all these trans people were being killed, and the protests started. And so each week I would think on Saturday, oh, what am I going to do? I better start to think about the show on Thursday. And each week something major would happen, so that I would have to go back to the drawing board, because I didn't want to pretend that I was oblivious to what was going on in the world. And so it actually became a really deep experience, because I had to find a real good balance between entertaining people, acknowledging what was going on in the world, and in a certain level, healing people. So, and myself.
And then, after doing that every week for months, you pivoted to something completely different, which is watercolor. And you created a gallery show in Provincetown of Witch Eyes by Viv. Describe what these witch eyes are. And if we can, we'll show some images of them.
Well, the witch eyes, I started doing them around the time Trump was elected, actually. And I started painting these little, they're on 4x4 watercolor paper. And I started painting these witch eyes because in the sort of like talismans to protect you from evil, they used to be called evil eyes or whatever, to like ward off evil spirits and stuff. And so I created these witch eyes to protect you from evil chodes. And they are basically to protect those of us who are feeling attacked by a heteropatriarchal culture. And so,
and they started off as being abstract eyes, but eventually they evolved to be real people, right?
Some of them were real people. It all started out with Joan Crawford, because Joan Crawford,
as it so often does.
in the 1950s, she was doing a show called Autumn Leaves, this movie called Autumn Leaves, and it was this younger director, and she'd been in show business for 30 years at that point. And the director said to her, "Can you cry on cue?" And she said, "Out of which eye?" And that was about,
so that's Witch Eyes.
It's Witch Eye, but it's like Witch Eye, but then I changed it to Witch Eyes. But it's about being undervalued and about being underestimated. And so I took all these, in this show, in this series, I took all these queer icons or people who were people who protect and defend people. So
give us a few of your favorites. Like, who are you particularly honored to paint a watercolor eye of?
All of them, really. But some of them turned out to be really profound when I was, because I'm staring into this person's eye for hours. And I was really moved when I did James Baldwin, because, you know, of all of the things that were going on. I did James Baldwin, I did I did Marsha P. Johnson. I watched, Hollywood while we were in quarantine. And I knew the story of Hattie McDaniel, but that really moved me. So I did Hattie McDaniel.
And you did some people younger and older? You did their eye at different points in their life?
I did young Marianne Faithfull, and I did later in life Marianne Faithfull, and I did Hollywood Lawn, Jackie Curtis, and Candy Darling as a triptych. And I was really influenced by an interview that Truman Capote did with Dick Cavett, where he wasn't even, I don't even think, speaking to Tennessee Williams at the time, but he dedicated a book to Tennessee Williams because he had this play come out, and it was, I think, 1980, Closed for a Summer Hotel, and it was savaged by the critics. And it was homophobia, that was really why people were attacking Tennessee Williams and devaluing his work. And Truman Capote made this passionate defense of Tennessee Williams that really, really moved me. And that's kind of was also what I was thinking when I started this series of eyes. And so my eye of Truman Capote is so beautiful. And I sold that with Tennessee Williams as a diptych. And they're really, and I had never really done men's eyes before, but I did a lot of queer men in this series.
So just to take a step back, when I look at the anti-glam to the witch eyes kind of is an encapsulation of the range of your entire career, from writing memoir to recording albums to doing opera and cabaret and TV and movies and on and on and on. How do you keep innovating, and how do you keep coming up with fresh new ideas?
Desperation, I guess. My mom said, "I don't worry about you. You just come up with these ideas." And I said, well, it's a good thing I did come up with these ideas, because they just sort of happened. I just did the anti-glam shows to entertain people. And then I found out, you could get tips for it. And that saved me, because I've got this house and I'm not going to be working in a live performance venue at least until deep into next year. And so the financial part of it was a kind of a side effect, and it was a miracle, really. And then when the lockdown happened, and I realized that, I wasn't going to be performing till who knows when. I had been asked to do this show because I did an art show in the same gallery 6 years ago. And I wasn't sure, because I had a lot of gigs scheduled for this year. And I thought, well, maybe it's going to be too much to try and prepare an art show. And so as soon as the lockdown happened, I called her and I said, "We're still on for that show, aren't we?" And she said, "Yeah." And so then I had been ambivalent about doing it as a show of witch eyes. But then when that Truman Capote thing hit me, I was like, this is the idea. This is what it has to be. Because then these witch eyes are going to do what I need them to do, remind people who is important.
Do you think There's something to this idea of your most creative bursts coming in the face of adversity. I mean, as you mentioned, Kiki, in a way, came out of the AIDS crisis. Anti-glam manifested during the pandemic. I mean, one of your most famous film roles in the movie Short Bus was very much, I think, about healing after 9/11. What do you see as the connection there?
Well, I just think that, trauma breeds creativity if you're lucky. And I've always been the kind of person who, when I am traumatized, I go inside myself. And so when I go inside myself, the only thing I can do is try to make myself feel better. And the only way I can really make myself feel better is through creativity. And the most frustrating part, I would say, of the last 6 months, as opposed to the AIDS crisis or 9/11, is that we're dealing with our trauma on our own and through these screens. Whereas, when the AIDS crisis was happening, you would go to an ACT UP meeting or a Queer Nation meeting, you would hug people, you would have coffee together, you would come up with ways of making it possible to just keep living. Whereas here, we're all sort of like separated from each other, and the only thing we have are these electronic outlets.
Yes.
And so I think I was one of the people that did it within the context of what was happening in the world.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing a show. I was doing a show that also, and that's what I do. I just, whether it's painting or it's all from something truthful within the context of the world. So if the world is more dire, the performances are more important.
All right, so if Act 1 was anti-glam and Act 2 was witch eyes, do you have an Act 3 in store?
Well, once it starts getting a little darker, weather-wise, people are stuck inside again, and as we get closer to the election, I think we're going to need more of those happy hour cocktails, because people are going to be stuck inside again, and I know I'm going to need it. I'm going to need some sort of release, so I think anti-glam will be back in time for the election and probably through the holidays. And also, a few days ago, Kiki and Herb launched the virtual season of the Public Theater. So our show from 3 years ago has been edited and mixed, and it's kind of fantastic. It really actually, it's Kiki and Herb Seeking Asylum, and it's streaming it through the Public Theater in New York City. So, and it's free.
Fabulous. Mix Justin Vivian Bond, thank you for your creations in the face of adversity over the years, and especially during this pandemic. And thank you for talking with us here at Pygmalion. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's good to see you. I can't
You
wait
too.
to hug you.
Someday soon.
I hope so.
I hope so.
My darlings, it's your Auntie Glam, and today I'm going to teach you, as promised, how to make a gin daisy, so that we can all share a cocktail on Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time for your Auntie Glam's happy hour, darlings. Now, always remember, before you make anything, to go to the sink and wash your jazz hands. You're supposed to do it for quite some time, but I already did it in preparation, so I don't have to take all that time to wash my jazz hands, my angels. But I just wanted to remind you, because it's very important to have a certain level of, cleanliness in this world of danger and germinations. Now, my darlings, the first thing we do when we make our gin daisy is we put ice. We put ice in this. Oh my dear. Somebody really closed the fuck out of this fucker. Oh my heavens, darlings, I can't get it open. Well, maybe we won't be making a gin daisy. I've had quite a day, I have to say, my darlings. It's been a very annoying day for you, Auntie Glam. I want to kill.
In the 6 months since this pandemic started, everybody in the arts has been trying to figure out how to make the events that they love to create succeed in a virtual space, like this one, for example. Some have worked better than others, and the best one that I've seen debuted in April. It was called Saturday Night Seder. Now, the Seder is the festive meal that Jews have to celebrate the holiday of Passover. And this Seder included dozens of celebrities, from Jason Alexander to Billy Porter to Bette Midler playing the prophet Elijah. And 3 of the creators join us now to talk about how they pulled it off. Shayna Taub, Adam Cantor, and Alex Edelman. Thank you for joining us. And also, since it is now the Jewish high holidays, I should say Shana Tova, Happy New Year.
Yom Tov.
Thank you. Shana Tova to you too.
How did this cockamamie idea begin? Will one of you tell me like what started it all off?
I feel like that's an Adam Cantor. I feel like that's an Adam Cantor question to answer.
Take it away, Adam.
So in 2017, Benj Pasek, who's not on this call, called me. I had just finished doing Fiddler on the Roof, and he was like, "You want to do a Passover concert?" And like Danny Burstein can be telling stories and in a rocking chair, and we'll do something fun. And I was like, "Sure, let's do it." That turned into sort of a Bedouin tent experience. Shayna Taub performed an amazing song. I don't want to get the title wrong. So what is the title of the song that you sang, Emma?
I sang Huddled Masses then. I had just written it. Yeah.
It was
based on the Emma Lazarus poem.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Ari, you performed an incredible song at that.
Okay, you're outing me now. So I was a part of the early iteration, yes. But to create something virtually over Zoom with such an ambitious lineup of celebrities, original music, at a time when the only previous example was a really cringe-inducing celebrity compilation of people singing the song Imagine, all in different keys, what made the 3 of you think this could actually work?
I think Benj and I were, I don't think anyone was thinking as practically or high-minded as that. We were just, I think by the way, Seder was created by a group of Jews and non-Jewish Passover enthusiasts that Benj was talking to that week. That's what happened. It's just Benj and I were texting, and Benj was texting with another couple of people, and everyone seemed to be missing Seder. And so this was, I don't think any of us were thinking of this as a specific piece of content. I think we were thinking of this as a, and Adam or Shayna can correct me, but we were thinking of this as a way to celebrate the holiday and, have an outlet for our creative energies, and then, maybe raise some money for coronavirus. And the fact that it was good just sort of came from, I think, a lot of folks being talented and wanting a place to put their talents.
I do want to talk more about the fundraising element of it, but to stay focused on the creative part of it for a minute, Shayna, the Passover Seder has so many songs associated with it, some of which are included in this production, like Idina Menzel singing the 4 questions, which are usually sung by the youngest child at the table. But you also wrote original music for this. How did you approach that challenge, given how much well-established, beloved music there already is for this holiday?
Totally. Well, I got pulled in a little later. So the geniuses over here were pulling 16-hour Zoom sessions, putting this whole thing together. And I got a text from Benj at like 11 o'clock one night. I've been calling it like a songwriting booty call. He was basically like,
you up?
With Mark Sonnenblick, who's also one of the creators of this. And they're like, we're doing this Seder. And I've been involved in the in-person Seders in the before times. And they were like, we're doing a virtual version. Can we write a song? And it was this idea, of taking the inspiration from that last line of a traditional Seder of next year in Jerusalem. And how could we take that classic tradition and sort of imbue it with something new that felt hopefully both something that could apply to a Seder at any moment in history, but especially now, and this idea of how this year is so fraught and really trying to look toward the future with some sense of hope, but without ignoring the dark reality of what's going on. And so it's just sort of jammed on that idea, and with Hannah, the other amazing songwriter involved in the Seder, of like how we could take that hook of next year. So like, I think it was like taking a seed from something that is part of Seder usually, and then bringing something new to it.
When you can't go out, get drunk and shout that ain't new anyway.
So you need to go out shopping, but it's better not to risk it. Use some fruit snacks for Ferosit and beef jerky for the brisket.
If you're out of greens and table salt, well, don't you fret, my dears. Just use a stick of celery to wipe away your tears.
kids all need the bath. The only thing they learn in homeschool is their father sucks at math.
Dayenu. Tonight the food's symbolic. The egg means spring.
And all this wine means I'm an alcoholic.
Dayenu.
What more is there to say? When life is hell, you gotta yell Dayenu anyway.
You're making a really good point about the connection between the eternal themes of Passover and the moment that this particular Seder took place in. Can you tell us about, I mean, the three of you tell us about how this experience not only reflected an attempt to celebrate this holiday in a difficult time, but also an attempt to process this crazy moment that we're all living through?
You know, I think that, you know, all of us came from very different backgrounds in terms of Judaism. No one person's, you know, journey through Yiddishkeit is the same. And I think what we talked about, we took a really specific amount of time before we started production to actually talk about how we're going to approach this. So in a way that was both grounded in tradition, but you know, progressive in a way that was both timeless but speaking to our present moment. And we had long discussions about the things that we didn't want in the Seder and the things that we did want in the Seder and where to put them. And so we got a lot of help from, you know, from the rest of the writing staff and from our producers like Rachel Sussman and Rebecca Atalia Halperin and Adam. And it was a big, huge group discussion about how much we address our current moment, how much we, you know, and how we carry over those themes. But thankfully for us, like, you know, we tried to celebrate the, you know, the dark irony of a holiday about liberation and a time of literal confinement because of a plague. So those things actually sort of dovetailed quite nicely with each other.
Shayna, Adam, what did this mean for you, celebrating this holiday in such a different way at a moment that the themes of the holiday felt more relevant than ever?
I think it became clear that, as Alex was saying, emotionally, you know, we were living in a time when we were, there was a lot of darkness outside of the walls of, you know, the dining room, right? I mean, we were eating a meal, and outside there's chaos, there's sickness, there's a lot of fear. And so the need for a story to be told, for questions to be asked, and for some kind of meaningful connections to take place was like very, very palpable in a way that I don't think we've experienced in any Seders in our lifetimes. And, you know, probably a lot of the viewers of Saturday Night Seder had not experienced.
And for you, Shayna?
Yeah, I mean, two things are on my mind. You know, I've always connected to the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, and thinking, how can we as artists use our gifts in this moment to make an offering to others and bring in people. That sort of, I love how that concept, that's sort of the Jewish version, but it's such a universal thing that we all try to do, to like use, okay, what tools do I have? How can I use them to better the world in this moment? And even though we couldn't gather, we still had our creative, artistic, comedy, music skills and how we could put those to use. And then just of these themes of confinement to liberation, and the fact that, you know, all the things, and I'm not as scholarly of a Jew as some of these others, you know, I'm still like coming into my Judaism now, but how, you know, you shall not oppress a stranger, for we know what it's like to be a stranger in the land of Egypt, and how those themes have just become more and more resonant. We wanted to really do something that was rooted in those Jewish values I'm talking about, but that we know are really values that run through all major religions and cultures in their own way, and to take the form of a Seder. And how can we use this moment? You know, the millions of people tuned in, that's more than you would ever have at a Seder. And our hope, I think, was that it was something that was special to Jews, but special for people across faiths and backgrounds.
Yeah, was it tough to thread the needle between like the sacred and the sacrilegious? Because it's really funny, and it is not like bound to the Passover liturgy, but there's also a lot of rabbis in and among the movie stars and pop stars who are making appearances.
You know, we had long conversations about that, and I wanted to make, you know, Jews feel seen across the spectrum. And so that was tough actually sometimes too, because I feel like I'm a bit more of a sort of centrist Jew. So, you know, we took steps to make sure that traditional Jews would feel included as well as progressive Jews, because I think that there are times that it's hard to hold both. But I think it's really authored in the sense that, you know, this was created by sort of a set of socially conscious, you know, Jews who sort of have an open and inclusive tent. And so even though we tried to make everyone feel seen and give it a real rabbinic heft, it also, you know, we talked about how to thread the needle and eventually decided that the best way to do that was to sort of be true to our, you know, true to our social and religious values. And thankfully it resonated with people across the religious spectrum, as Shane just said.
And we made the tough call to not censor certain people that had things to say.
Yeah.
And knowing that we would get hate mail, and I could screen share those with you.
I can guess who you're referring to, but I'm not going to name any names.
Let's find out who found the Afikoman.
What the actual? Ugh. Oh my God. Oh my God, I found the Afikoman. I found the Afikoman! It was inside my. Oh my gosh. I knew it was inside me the whole time.
Let's get TMZ for a moment. Who was the celebrity who you were most like, we are never going to get that person, who wound up participating?
Bette
Midler.
If I have a recording of the writers' room when Bette, I was like, oh my God, cuts. Bette Midler just sent through her tape, and I think some of the writers didn't even know that we had gotten Bette because her agent was like, send what you want her to say. And so I sent off an email thinking that it was still kind of like up in the air, and then we just got an email with a video attachment and just like opening that up and screen sharing it in the writers' room.
Hi, everybody. Happy Pesach. It's me, Elijah. I'm so happy to see you. Were you expecting somebody else? A man, maybe? Yeah, that happens to me a lot. Please, nobody but me could pull off a schedule like this. Now, for those of you out there who don't know me, I'm kind of like Santa Claus. But my people leave me glasses of wine instead of cookies and milk. And my only gift to them is wisdom. I do want to say, though, to all my friends out there who've been so kind over the years, plying me with wine and moror and harosis and all that, I've been sober for about 300 years. So next year, a few granola bars would be just fine. Well, anyway, I just want to say, I know you might be having a tough time out there all by yourselves, maybe going a little bit stir crazy. Yeah, it's very scary, but listen, I have to visit 2 million homes a night, and that is very, very scary too, and it's not good social distancing. So stay in. Just want to say stay in, wash your hands, be kind, be good to each other. Mostly be good to each other. Elijah, over and out.
It's just like, that was pretty crazy, but honestly, like, I was a big fan of Shayna's, and like, I'm not kidding, I was a big Shayna fan, and I kept pitching ideas for songs that Shayna had already written that I had seen her perform live, and then like Ben was like, I'll just text her and call her up so to like have a Seder where like we have an original Shayna Taub tune is like.
I should have said this at the top, but all three of you have a long history in Broadway, in television. I mean, like, you are very established outside of Saturday Night Seder. This is like the least of your accomplishments.
No, it's not the best thing I've ever done. But.
There's a beautiful element, I think, folks from as, Bette Midler and everything in between, but we're down to do this. There was no big budget, there was no studio, there was no commercial. It was just this very, like Ben likes to say, this very put on a show, grassroots, as high level as many of the celebrities were, this kind of grassroots vibe in those early days of the pandemic of just wanting to do something to bring togetherness and joy. And so I think it was very a very pure and generous spirit on everyone.
What I love so much about it is that I feel like in times of crisis, everyone says, what can I do? And artists say, what can I do? And especially when arts venues are all closed, it's really hard to answer that question. And you came up with an answer that was not only emotionally powerful, but actually like financially powerful for the CDC Foundation. This was a fundraiser. And if I had sat you down a week before Saturday Night Seder aired and asked each of you to guess how much money it would raise for the CDC Foundation, like what would each of you have guessed?
We were very excited the day of when we hit 20,000 before we aired.
Yeah.
To think that we're now approaching 4 million is absolutely insane.
I mean, couldn't we have kept 1% of this money, guys? Like, how many masks do these nurses need, honestly? But I'm kidding. But I thought, like, I was like, man, Jen Snow, who's one of the people that worked on Seder, a wonderful lady. We were talking before, having like a sidebar convo, and I was like, maybe like if we raise like 200,000, how amazing would that be? Like if we got to 250,000, like $250,000 for this thing. And Jen was like, we might get to $500,000. I was like, no way. And then on the night, only cleared $1 million. Is pretty wild.
So
we're all on a Zoom watching together. I think when we were all, when we were approaching, it was great to sort of experience it with each other, not just the content itself, but see those numbers keep rising.
Yeah. Shayna, you mentioned this really powerful song you wrote, Next Year, which I think is a nice place for us to end the conversation and to end tonight's salon. But when you wrote this song, you didn't have the videos that were interspersed into the final production that showed all of these frontline workers and others saying their hopes for next year, which was the moment that totally destroyed me. Will you describe what it was like for you, having written this song, the first time you saw that completed piece, that production with those sentiments woven in?
It was extremely moving. I mean, I think it was those early days, I feel like, I had my personal experience with COVID, that my husband had it pretty badly, and he's okay now. And I had been, over consuming news and reading about it, but to actually see the faces of frontline workers and hear those very emotional expressions of hope from them, I think it just put it all in perspective for me. And I think that's for like the power of what art can do, is to make a hammock for that kind of radical empathy of like, I think the best thing we could do from this was to create that moment where millions of people got to really hear not just the data that was coming through about coronavirus and news articles, but from the hearts of the people who are on the front lines. And so it was very, very impactful. I'm so honored to be part of it.
I mean, those workers were the last next year is my dad, who's a doctor at the intensive care unit for cardiology at Brigham Women's Hospital, and those frontline workers were his staff that he's well. And like Shayna said, it was early on in the pandemic, and so I was living at my parents' house, but I was quarantined from my father. So so watching that, and Shayna and Skylar Aston, they had just performed this incredible thing, and we knew that we wanted to do a take on Next Year in Jerusalem, and we asked a bunch of folks for those videos, but until we watched the final product and saw how beautifully Shayna and Skylar performed the song and how well the videos fit into that, I don't think any of us sort of realized how powerful it was. And I genuinely can't watch the video because I really go to pieces. So yeah, it's great.
Well, thanks to all three of you for creating this piece, for talking with us about it. And I hope that next year we're able to all be together face to face. But until then, it's been wonderful to see you on Zoom.
Shana Tova.
Next year.
And Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, everyone.
When the walls have grown narrow, when the world has turned gray, and the headlines are harrowing days. and wonder how long you'll stay lost. Remember the oceans and deserts we've already crossed. 'Cause next year, the doors will break open. Next year, we'll breathe in the sky. Though tomorrow's uncertain, we're gonna get by till it's here. So here's to next year.
Here's to next year.
When the people are bleeding, 'cause the days seem so stark, and when there's nobody leading you out of the dark, can't let the misery harden your heart. The worst will pass over, and one day the waters will part. 'Cause next year, the world will break open. Next year, we'll breathe in the sky. Though tomorrow's uncertain, we're gonna get by till it's here. So here's to next year. Here's to next year. Oh yeah, alright.
Here's to next year.
Next year, hugging and kissing every single person I've ever loved in my entire life.
Next year, everywhere in the world.
Next year, in Jerusalem, all of us in good health.
Next year, not a year.
Next year, we will be on vacation.
To what?
To Hawaii.
With friends.
With friends.
And family.
And family, sure.
Why are you copying me?
Next year, in a more fair country.
Next year, with our families and chosen families.
नेक्स्ट ईयर हम लोग भी अपना सोच रहे बिजनेस के लिए कुछ अपना खुद का बिजनेस हो और अपना बिजनेस सक्सेसफुल रहे तो अपनी फैमिली के साथ मुंबई में शिफ्ट हो सके.
Next year in a real democracy.
Next year in a theater with all of you.
I'm gonna say next year I'm a boyfriend's house. I'm looking for a man, a nice man.
Next year, performing for everyone in the same room.
Next year,
With her grandparents.
Next year, holding hands.
Next year, I want to be surrounded by even more of my Jewish brothers and sisters.
Next year, with hugs and kisses with family.
Next year, in my mom's kitchen in Long Island.
Next year, by Lake Michigan in Chicago with my family.
Next year, mask-free, drinking gin and tonics.
Next year, in health, at peace, with family, at home.
Next year, world will break open. Next year, taking the skies.
The world will break open. We'll breathe in the sky. It's gonna be better. It's gonna be brighter.
As you wonder and wonder how long you'll stay lost.
Remember the oceans and deserts we've already crossed.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside. Next year in Jerusalem. God bless.
And thanks to all of you who joined us here tonight at our closing Night Salon for the Pygmalion Festival. We hope to see you in Champaign-Urbana next year at this time. Stay safe and be well.
once came across a blind dinosaur. We foresaw what went and came before us. Do you even think he saw us? But like Taurus, I'm relentlessly pacing, chasing a deeper view. Socially conditioned, positioned without a right to choose. Right to choose. If I had a right, I'd choose left. No